Let me begin by thanking Patterns for Progress, not just for convening this meeting, but for its continued commitment to a kind of discussion which, at the end of the day, is probably the most important way we can address the substantive issues and problems we face. There is a paucity of real dialogue where people can offer views and opinions, be disagreed with without feeling that somehow there's an alienated quality to the discussion, and Patterns for Progress does that. We also thank the sponsors who have ponied up to make sure that this kind of thing can continue. This is the real deal, and it's important, and it ought to continue. I am the keynote speaker. I have the foggiest idea, never have, about what a keynote speaker is supposed to do. But this I can promise you. For those of you I have not had the opportunity to talk with, I have opinions and am not reluctant to share them. I don't think that that's necessarily what I can do that is of most value. So I propose to try to describe what I think is happening and to use that as the basis for the more focused and particular comments you'll hear from the panelists and other presenters later today. And let me then just say one other thing. I want to especially welcome and appreciate the public officials and public servants who are in the room. It is a time when that is a job much honored in the breach, and especially now I have a great affection for supervisors and mayors and county executives and governors and presidents, but I am especially pleased when members of the legislative body are here. America is a beacon of liberty around the world not because of our executives. Our system differs from Saudi Arabia and Russia not because we have better or worse executives, which we do in some cases, but because we have legislative bodies that check them. And although legislative bodies are in particularly bad odor across the country for reasons that I think are worth another convocation, I'm glad to see those of you who are here fulfilling that function. I think it's fair to say that for a variety of reasons, the great weight of a political change in the United States has fallen heavily and, to this point, almost exclusively on local governments. We came through a period over the last 75 or 80 years where, from an activist, involved, problem-solving image of government, we came to a point where many people view government as the essential problem. And the response to that was a series of political and policy initiatives, including downsizing, a philosophical and practical reluctance to tax, and the sense that in some quarters you starve the beast to get to the goal you wanted. The beast, it turns out, is not Washington, it's not Albany, it's Newburgh. And the consequences of these large philosophical and political battles, which were fought in the national and statewide political and press and policy arenas, is how do you pay for cops and firemen at the most extreme level of that debate. Now, there are a series of conventional explanations for that. Again, this is my attempt at description. I want to repeat, I have opinions, but when you want them, you'll let me know. Description one is that governments have been spending excessively, spending wastefully and excessively, spending corruptly, wastefully, and unnecessarily, and are the captive of the public sector unions who drive those behaviors for their own self-interest and are one prime route for the problems that average people face in their relationship with local governments. There is another explanation that says whatever the expenditure levels, they were intended to and often did address real social, human, economic, community-based problems, and that we as a society have decided to take our tax rates way down below what the historical level has been, and we are starving not the beast, but the thing that unites and keeps us together as communities. Pick whichever one you like for now, but they contend in the political arena and are reduced to slogans and movements. That's the way the American system functions. That's not a bad thing, but we've come to a point, as you heard Jonathan speak, where the political ascendancy of the first model I gave you is now being wrestled with by people who have to decide what schools and garbage pickup looks like, and crime in the streets, and health care, away from those big battles. I've been asked by the mayor of the city of Yonkers, Michael Spano, former assemblyman, to work with Dick Ravitch and some other folks to sort of just figure out, lay out the problems in the city of Yonkers. I've been consulted on similar concerns by counties and cities and towns around the rest of the state in a more off-the-record private way. And here's what I've learned. The debate can't even start on solutions until there's an agreed measurement of the problem. That is to say, until the public, the chattering class, and the political class can agree in a community on what the size and nature of the problem is, you won't be able to effectively communicate across divides about the remedy. So in Yonkers, what we did, and it was extremely useful, was we calculated the out-year budget gaps. In that case, there were going to be gaps, and did so in a public, accountable, explainable way, and laid it out prior to the budget season. And the community, the press, the city council, bought the numbers. Now, if we are going to address the question of municipal financing, that seems to me to be a simple and extraordinarily necessary step. In the case of Yonkers, and I suspect elsewhere, that result had to come from an outside body. The political structures, even the advocacy groups, be they unions or the business community, if you want to use them as contending forces, are incredible in these crises. So we took step one with that. We did some other things that I'll mention, which I think are going to be extraordinarily valuable. But the mayor insisted that going into his first budget, he be able to tell the people of the city credibly, look, this is what I'm doing this year, but it's based upon my read of what the objective reality is in the out years. And I think he gained the confidence of all in the city when that occurred. Now, that model, I think, ought to be replicated. I don't know how yet. The governor has decided to take a relatively low-key position on the looming tidal wave of municipal problems in the state. I can't say he's wrong yet. Timing is everything. In the middle of a legislative session, we'll see what happens. But if I had advice to this room or any other room, is to the extent you're wrestling with your own problems, figure out a way where everybody even the people with whom you disagree with on remedy share a definition of the actual objective issues before the body politic. The other elements of a crisis, is it the fault of the labor contracts? Is our pension costs high? Also will come into play more naturally when those parties think they share a view of the problem. Now, the second big lesson, I sort of knew intuitively from my time in the legislature, but became much clearer when you had to go through the books, was that everywhere in the state, Republicans, Democrats, reactionaries, progressives, everybody has been budgeting dishonestly. There has been a culture of budgeting in which the real object, that recurring revenues must match recurring expenditures, has been ignored, abused, denied, and at the heart of the next step is that has to stop. That has to stop. You can believe we are not spending enough on schools or hospitals. You can believe that pensions are too low, and there's a good argument there in some cases. If you look at CSEA retirees, they're retiring on pensions on average in the mid-20s. You're looking at uniform services, they're way up there. That's a good, interesting debate to have. But whatever your position is on that, you can't continue to budget non-recurring revenues for recurring expenses and expect the sky won't fall on you. Used to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Now it's next week. Now, the Patterns for Progress report, which you've all had a chance to review, does an interesting and quite good first step in actually examining that. Because if you look at it, it says hooray for those who kept within the 2% cap, but we note for your edification that a lot of that's not a sustainable process because, among other things, they ate up a lot of fund balance. It's a reasonable point. I never thought I'd have the opportunity to say this to Jonathan, but you're much too modest and quiet in your analysis. Because when you look at the way in which city, town, county budgets are being produced, they remain committed to a process of using one-shot revenues for recurring expenditures.